Hello, people. If anyone's watching this, this is podcast number one of a podcast. That's all we got right now. I'm Andrew. That's Nate. I'm joined by Nate, and we're gonna talk about stuff and things. So,
That's correct.
yeah. Um, one second. Let me make sure. Okay. Got the chat up just in case someone walks in, and then they can correct our audio if need be. Um,
Sounds good.
but yeah, how you been, man?
I've been pretty good, like you, I've been laid off, so that's been exciting. But I don't know. The whole world is a little bit on fire right now, so I don't feel too left out.
That is fair. So yeah, it's been kind of wild. It's been Corona into race riots into nation being formed. So that's been interesting. Uh, so yeah, any thoughts on the new nation? And it almost it had a chance, but it doesn't seem like it lasted, unfortunately.
Well, I don't know. I don't think it ever really had a chance. I don't think that anyone ever thought it was a real threat. For example, back in the day when Waco was a thing, the ATF went in and just annihilated pretty much everyone in that little compound. And they found that to be threatening. For some reason. I still don't really fully understand how Waco was a big threat, but they didn't do anything with the chop in Seattle, which I am like 10 minutes from.
Yeah, kind of
I think that
wild.
everyone knew would just go away.
Yeah. Any rethinking your Ancapistan stance there?
I actually have a little bit. I still think anarchy can work in a society. I think the society needs to be homogenous in thought. I think it needs to have almost a. It's going to sound a little ironic, but I think it needs to have more of a civic nationalist approach. And anarchy doesn't mean without rules; it means without rulers. So I think that
Sounding like a
can be
commie
possible.
man.
No, no, no. Communists have a lot of rules.
I don't know. No rulers. Everyone's equal. Got to overthrow the bourgeoisie so the proletariat can take over. Sounding kind of commie.
Well, no, I think that everyone. So you need to have a way of getting everyone to buy into, or at least the vast majority of everyone to buy into the non-aggression principle.
Yeah, but
Um,
like, why would
to
you
have such a
follow it?
society.
That's the thing that no one seems to be able to answer. Why should I follow the non-aggression principle?
Okay, well, I think that as someone who is at least adequate at taking care of myself, I don't really feel threatened by, I don't know, I guess anyone. I am a concealed firearms owner. And I think that in a society that is well armed, that has generally the same morals, I think that you would have a very polite society.
I don't disagree with that, but what I'm saying is the non-aggression principle isn't a moral foundation for anything. It's just saying be nice to each other. And the question is why? Why should I be nice to somebody else? Especially if the ruling the only thing that matters is that you get more capital than the next person.
Um, yeah, that. Hmm. Well, I think that with the non-aggression principle, it's pretty much the whole Jesus idea of treat your neighbor as you want to be treated, the golden rule, except it's more universal because I don't know, a very strong man can be okay with violence, can be okay with aggression for getting what he wants,
Yeah, but
and he should
that's
could think that everyone should be able to do that. Non-aggression principle just universalizes it.
yeah, but that's why Jesus specifically said, "Love everyone as I have loved you," not love everyone as you feel like you should love them, right? So it's following the path and the way of Jesus, not so that you can't do that like jujitsu type move of like, well, I want to go and destroy everyone, and since I can, and I think it's okay for that, then I can do it. So that's how that gets resolved. But what I'm saying is, without if you don't have a moral foundation like Christianity, or uh, you know, you can be Islamic or whatever, like you have to have some kind of moral foundation that sets up the society to be able to build a civilization on. And if you don't have that, like, what are you gonna do? Like, there are civilizations that have existed, not necessarily not without a moral code, but like they found it through something else. Like the Romans obviously didn't have uh, Christianity, but they had like this really weird like adherence, like long-term adherence to like their set of rules, where it's like you're not allowed to break these. And like once finally someone asked why, his name was Caesar. Uh, then the entire thing broke down in like the matter of like 50 years. But if you have that moral foundation with which Christianity gives you, then you can. There's at least a bulwark against it. Obviously, we've seen with our Western civilization, we've seen a breakdown of that, and people not wanting to follow that and stuff, and that's been going on for. Well, it's always a struggle. It's always a fight between those two forces of wanting to follow uh, devil or the Jesus thing. You know, the devil's tempting plenty of times. If evil wasn't fun, nobody would do it. Uh, but you know, it just there's I find a lot to be desired when it comes to things like the non-aggression principle and stuff.
Okay, well, I think non-aggression principle is so. I don't think that you could have a functioning anarchist society without morals. 100%. I don't think you can have a functioning society, period, without morals. And I think that in our daily lives, we do generally, at least with non government actors, we rely on the non aggression principle. You rely on people not committing violence against you. And if people do commit violence against you, you rely on your ability to repel them. And I think in places like America, where in general you can own tools of great force like firearms to defend yourself, most Americans are pretty darn safe. And I don't think that the government is a very good tool of of enforcing morality or enforcing any of their known rules. And all government rules, which are called laws, are just rules that we enact as a society and enforce through violence.
Sure, but
The
like,
government can't even keep drugs out of prison.
yeah, but okay, so the difference between that is like, okay, the government also has failed to stop murder completely, but murder is still illegal. You know, it's like just because some a moral system says it's bad and people decide to do it anyway, doesn't mean that we should abolish the law and therefore declare that the thing that we had said was bad previously is now good.
Okay, yeah, yeah. Obviously, just because something happens doesn't mean we should let it happen. I understand that argument. Murder, wrong. I think violence is only good in the form of self defense. I think everyone should be able to do whatever they want as long as it doesn't infringe on the rights of someone else.
But there's so many ways to infringe on people's rights without uh, violence, and then it's and here's the thing, it's like, okay, well, at what point do you get the onus to commit violence, right? So let's say I took out a contract, right, that said I was going to pay back some loan or whatever, and then and the basic way loans work is eventually there's more interest due than the original principal, and the entire system has to collapse. But then does that person get to take by force everything that they loaned out, despite the fact they knew the entire thing was going to blow up in the first place? Like, why do they get to commit violence based on basically a false premise?
You're talking about getting people into contracts that the contractor is knowing will screw someone else, right?
Yeah,
At a high level.
yeah. Basically, it's getting people forced into contracts that are effectively to their disadvantage because they're in a disadvantage, like a certain situation. A good example is the what was it? It's called mixed will. So the idea of a captain throws his cargo overboard in a rough sea situation because it saves the ship. Now he doesn't want to throw his cargo overboard, and he'd rather not do that. But it's kind of a mixed thing of like, well, I kind of have to do this to preserve what we have right now, and then we'll try to figure something out later. So it's like, okay, well, you can get someone into a position where you can force them into a loan or force them into a contract or force them into various situations where they basically kind of are like, okay, well, I don't want to take this deal. I know it's to my disadvantage, but I'm in a situation where I need like this or I die kind of thing.
All
And
right, so I think the use of or the term force is a little bit misleading there because force is always through coercion or through violence. Um,
I'm not saying force. What I'm saying is there's a mixed will there, but then when they get the sign, once you coerce that person into signing that contract, but because they're in a situation in which they kind of have to, now you have the if they can't come uh, keep their end of the bargain, which the person that got them to sign it and them going into it both knew that wasn't really possible because they it was kind of like I have to do this or I die. Kind of like imagine a guy coming out of the desert and he's like, I need uh I need water. I got like lost in the desert. I'm gonna die or whatever. So the person that's there has two options, right? You can be like, all right, I want your house. I want everything you have on you, like all this stuff, and then I'll give you water. Or you can take the route that would be like the moral thing and just be like, and help the guy out, right? Oh, here's some water. Are you good? Let's make sure you got everything you need. Make sure you're not going to die or whatever, right? You could take advantage of that person and basically just extract him for all his wealth. I know it's a kind of an extreme situation, but you could extract him for all his wealth right there, and then uh, he was just kind of like he's like, well, I was in a situation where that was the deal, and that's kind of what I had to do, but I didn't really want like I knew short term I had to do it, but long term it was going to be a bad decision. And then, like, let's say he doesn't try to, he's like, I don't want to fulfill this contract. Well, now that person, based on your whole system, has a legal authority to inflict violence on that person to take the property that he was basically coerced into. You see what I'm saying?
so I kind of see what you're saying. So I don't really see how that relates to anything I can think of in society other than maybe jails, where we can charge people for being in jail and then give them debt after they're out of jail because they didn't choose to go to jail in the first place, and then they come out of jail with debt.
Yeah,
And
that
I don't
would
know.
be a
I
good
would
example.
suggest that something like that would. I don't know. I don't know if something like that could happen in society. I'm having a hard time thinking of something, and I would suggest that in
I mean,
most
that's how
societies,
this is how debt plays out every time.
okay.
So
Well,
go ahead.
for example, with a housing crash that happened, I know that that was because the government forced banks to give out loans to people who were, for lack of better words, bad bets.
The It doesn't matter because the housing market was always going to. Okay, here's the deal. Debt always the entire debt system has to collapse because it is inherently set up to collapse because it has to exponentially grow. Well, nothing exponentially grows. So the instant it stops exponentially growing, it doesn't just taper off, it completely collapses. So basically what happens is because you have interest on debts, right? It makes it so the amount so when I take out a loan, so debt's money, right? And so when I
Yes.
take out a loan, I add like let's say there's $5,000 in circulation. I take out a loan for $5,000, and then uh, and go spend that on whatever I'm going to spend it on. Now there's $10,000 in circulation. We have just doubled the money supply. Then I have to go pay that money back to the person plus interest. So now from that 10,000, let's say I had to pay him back $6,000. So now I got to go pay back that from that loan $6,000 of the 10,000 total pool. So now after when I get that fully paid back, there's actually less money in the pool to go around. Now, if you extrapolate that out and have a bunch of people adding money into the pool and how the interest rates work and stuff like that, there's more money owed than is money in circulation. And this is
Yeah,
how
I see what
debts
you're saying.
always play out. So that right there sets up a situation in which basically you gave someone a loan, you said you're going to owe me this much money plus interest. This system's definitely going to fail, but you still owe it to me. And if you don't owe it to me, I get to take basically everything you own, right? I I either get the money
I think
and
it's pay.
some, or
Yeah.
I get your stuff.
Okay. Well, I'm just curious. So I don't know if that's strictly immoral, and maybe I just haven't thought about it enough. That's definitely a possibility. But like, let's say you come to me and I don't have a ton of money. Let's say it's just two private people,
Yep.
and you need some sort of surgery for your leg or whatever, and I can't really afford to give you the money, but I can afford to give you the money for a time being, and I need you to pay it back. And maybe we can have, like, let's say we're spending $5,000 to
Hmm.
get your knee replaced or something. I don't know what the cost of that is. And I'm saying to you, I need you to give me another $500 on top of that when that comes back in. Maybe that's due to inflation, or because I would have invested that money and I would have gotten more money back at a later date. And I can show you those numbers, which I can't because I don't know what the inflation rates are right now.
It's usually
I
about
don't think that would
10%.
be strictly immoral if it was going between two private parties.
Why does the fact that it's between private parties have anything to do with it? The core system still works the same, and the matter of the fact
Okay,
is,
would it
the
be
person
immoral
would
though?
it
Yep.
causes giving out loans causes inflation, so that it's potentially the situation that's precipitating his um, shortage of cash. So that's situation number one. And then situation number two is charity can take care of this, right? I'm in a situation I need my knee replaced so I can continue working and providing for my family. You can have people cheer, or you're, if we're friends, right? Like, okay, yeah, I will give you I'll give you a loan or whatever for $5,000, and you just pay me back the $5,000. Um, and then with maybe the exception, or not the exception, but the caveat is, if I was in a similar situation, you'd have my back. I mean, you do that with your friends all the time, right? I'll help you out, you're gonna help me out later. You just kind of, you don't keep tallies of who owed who and how for how much. You just expect that friends help each other out, and pays when someone gets you, you expect to get them back, or at the very least you'll get another friend. You'll kind of pay it forward, kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, no, I understand that. That's more of either a charity aspect, like you said, or it's just helping a friend out and hoping that they will pay you back later.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, no, I hear you on that. With inflation, I think that the money value, I mean, it's self evident that the money value does change by the year. Um, I just don't see how it's immoral to ask your friend to adjust for inflation, but then that would be the same.
Because money can't copulate.
Well, yeah, I wish it could, but it can't. Actually, I don't wish it could because then it'd be worth nothing. Um, yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. I guess I really just don't know enough about the loaning and the interest rates and all that to comment on it in a super educated manner. It's not something I'm super educated on.
Yeah, fair enough. I I'm gonna talk to somebody about it next week, so that'll be exciting. But uh, yeah, let's bounce to the next thing, which is they've been kind of talking about potentially doing another lockdown here. Do you think people are gonna go ahead with it? Like, my brain is like, oh, there's no way that people are gonna go along with another lockdown. But at the same time, they went along with the first one, so why wouldn't they go along with the second one? Like, for me, I'm like, oh, I'm not gonna go along with another lockdown. But it's like, you know, if everything's shut down, I kind of de facto am, right? It's like, I'm gonna go to the bar. Well, the bar's closed, so you don't actually have an option.
Yeah, well, if something's closed, I'm probably not going to participate in it. Do I think people will go along with it, as in people will buy that it's the right thing to do? No, I don't think so as a whole. I think most people, especially young, healthy people who don't have pre existing conditions, think that this is pretty silly at this point for the most part.
Do they though? I don't know. Like, the people bought it so hard the first time, and I don't like. So logic would dictate that, yeah, they figured it out and it's not gonna happen. But I think we lost. Like, our world's not operating on logic currently. So
No, which would suggest that it ever has, but continue.
I mean, it has for sure. Like, not every obviously there's a there's two different types of people. There's dialectic and there's rhetorical thinkers, right? But that doesn't mean that there hasn't, in general, been societies that have worked on reason over emotion. I mean,
Yeah. I mean, Stoicism is literally based on that.
yeah, I'm supposed to get that book next week. I'm excited. So we
Yeah.
might maybe that'll be next week's topic.
I would love to have a conversation over the Marcus Aurelius Meditations and any supporting books or writings on that. I think that that is a really, really interesting philosophy on life, and it's not strictly a religious take on things, although he does talk about the gods, not God,
Well, yeah, they were.
but pagans.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, no, I don't think that people are, for the most part, going to go along with this. Most people I know, which is not an argument, um,
Well, I
do
mean, we
not.
live in an area that's pretty. I would say is more susceptible to that kind of thing because you're in like one of the major centers, right, over in Seattle.
Yeah. No, I'm about 10 minutes drive from Seattle, that general area. But most people over here, and most of my friends are, about center right, center left.
Okay.
They just don't really care about this virus anymore. They just want to get on with their lives. Most people I talk to think that it's inevitable that they're going to get this virus, and that they might as well get it and get on with their lives.
Yeah, fair enough.
However, some people, I know several people who have bad pre-existing conditions such as asthma or Guillain-Barré or other nasty conditions, are very worried about getting it because it could potentially be a death sentence. For example, my doctor thinks that this virus is serious, and people with like asthma, where this virus really attacks your lungs, it could be a death sentence.
Yeah, but I mean, from the numbers we've seen, I highly doubt that. I mean, the simple fact that uh, was it Hong Kong? There's 4 people, four, right next to Wuhan. People travel there all the time for work, but for some reason, only 4 people are sick there. There's just not piles and piles of bodies like they said there was going to be, which I'm kind of disappointed by.
Yeah, and my grandmother actually got it, and she is totally fine. She was sick for like a week or so, and she's totally fine now. And she's in her late 70s, and I don't know if she was okay, then I'm assuming that it's probably not that bad as a whole, which is again not an argument. But we've been told many times that this really does attack the elderly and the susceptible, and I would assume that my grandmother of all people would be pretty susceptible.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, but I mean, old people are susceptible to almost everything, right? So it's
Yeah,
yeah,
like stairs.
yeah, them darn stairs. They're dangerous, man. They are dangerous.
Actually, one thing I want to talk about, if you're okay with jumping subjects a little bit,
Yeah, I'm fine. I
is
didn't really have much to say on that anyway.
yeah. So with I don't know, the whole Chaz going up in Seattle with the riots and with shutting everything down, I think that there actually is some good that will come out of this. For example, I think most people are looking to be more self-reliant than they have in generations.
Yeah, that's definitely an aspect. Like I started a garden this year. Um, well, I had one last year, but I expanded it slightly now that I'm back home and I had more room. Not just a small little balcony with really crappy sun. So that's been kind of fun. And yeah, I think more people are going to start doing that. Have their little victory gardens, so in case something does go down in terms of supply chains and such, they aren't left out in the cold, as it were.
Yeah, the Chaz or the Chop, whatever you want to call it in Seattle, is a little bit ridiculous. They've got a garden over there that, or they planted a bunch of lettuce and tomatoes and all that, which is just silly because lettuce gives you virtually 0 calories. And if
Yeah,
you're going to
dude.
garden anything, you have to garden things that are super calorie dense, like yams or potatoes. And I'm sure there's other things, but those really calorie dense foods are the things you want to look at.
Yeah, you need them potatoes, though.
Potatoes are the best.
Yeah. The Irish didn't work out so well for them though, unfortunately.
Oh, you can't have just one crop. You have to have like barley and wheat to go along with it because the chance of one of your crops failing is actually fairly high. I'm not sure how high it is in modern days, but I'm assuming it's relatively high. For example, I planted a bunch of carrots and they got this sort of weird carrot disease, and they were just freaking inedible. Like they grew, but they were very bitter and they just looked funny. But this is when I was like 13, so I probably could do a little bit of a better job now.
Yeah, I mean one of the tricks I've heard for that is to spread out the your plants. So like if you do like a monoculture and you do all the same like all potatoes in like this in one plot or whatever,
Yep.
uh, if that area gets diseased, you're gonna lose all your plants. Whereas if you do like a potato, like a one potato plant per like plot, then you're much better off in terms of your chance of uh, like the disease will only probably affect that one plant and it won't affect your entire crop. So
Yep. Yeah. And in addition to potatoes and yams and whatever else is high in calorie density, I would think that something like I don't know, rabbits and chickens would be virtually a inexhaustible source of protein because chickens, they lay eggs all the time, and eggs have a decent amount of calories in them. And rabbits, well, they breed like rabbits.
that is true. Yeah, I meant to finish this video. There was like why rabbits should be your first um, food source on like a homestead or something. I never did end up watching it, but it's on YouTube somewhere. And yeah, that was probably one of the core things that he was looking at was their their production potential. Personally, I'd probably do chickens first, just because they seem a little bit easier. But
I've heard chickens are a total pain in the butt to pluck and prepare for dinner.
I meant
But
just like laying chickens for
oh
eggs.
yeah, no, the eggs seem like the best source of protein, in my opinion. They also can be used to keep bugs out of your garden and all that.
Yeah, I just need to get wealthy before the stock market crash here. But how long do you think they're gonna push that crap out? Like,
The stock market crash?
yeah, or like not the stock market crash, but like we're in a recession, but like they're doing everything that in their power. Like it's gonna be like full blown depression. And they're doing everything in their power to like make it not be that until like the election's over. And oh man, I don't know if they can do it, but so far so good, I guess. Keep them checks coming, I guess.
Yeah, I don't really understand how anything works anymore. I would assume a country with as much debt as we have, or as much debt as pretty much any of the Western countries have, or even China and Japan, that we would all collapse. But we've all made a bad bet, and we're all in debt to each other. So I am just fundamentally confused about how anything works anymore.
Well, see, that's the thing. It's like you can kind of kick the can down the road, or kick the can down the road for a while, but it's kind of come to the end of the road at this one. Um, we've basically financialized everything that we possibly can, and just like you know, uh, there's not enough warm bodies to back the debt anymore, and so basically what happened is from um, about 1950s or basically end of World War II up to the financial crash of 2008, 2009. Uh, Debt grew at a rate of 2.5% per year. Funnily enough, it tracks inflation perfectly. Um, and so basically during that thing, that's when kind of the chickens came home to roost, and they were like, we were supposed to go through a debt deflation and get all that debt cleared out of the system, but they didn't want that to happen. That's where quantitative easing came in, right? And they're like, we will just print all of the money, and basically what that did is it caused debt disinflation. So basically we just stagnated. So debt wasn't declining, uh, but debt also wasn't increasing. and like the debt is what required, or no, the debt didn't follow our inflation. The debt followed our growth. So our growth was about 2.5% a year, and the debt grew at about 2.5% a year, and that all went out the window around 2009. And so they've just been kept, like the last decade, they've just been keeping it like steady and making sure that it's not going down, but they're trying to get it to go up, and they just can't get it to go up. And that's one of the reasons that they're trying to import more people into the system, because that's like another person that can take out a loan to do a thing. And that's one of the reasons that we have college debt so much now too, is because they needed to accelerate the amount of debt that people had. Like they needed to get people in debt. They needed people to be more in debt and sooner in their life than people had previous generations had, right? So, like you had the World War II generation, they basically didn't have really any debt. There's probably, um, they had their mortgage, and that was probably about it. And then the baby boomers, they had mortgages on like their house and like maybe a boat or like a car or something like that. And then, it started to kind of move early into the life where they would need to take out loans and stuff like that. And then with our generation, or with Gen X and our generation, it moved to college. Like, all right, well, we can jack up the amount of debt that people are in when they're in college, and then we can kind of get our debt to increase then. But it was like a short term solution and they were just trying to prevent the whole thing from crashing down, right? So
Yeah, it's a sugar high.
yeah, because like now that we're all in debt up to our eyeballs from student loan debt, they're like, all right, yeah, now you need to get a mortgage and like take out a loan for a boat and a car and all this other stuff. And all of us are like, no, you already put us like $30,000 in debt, and I barely am able to make enough money to pay this off. Why would I go and get myself more into debt? And so like this is where the whole thing's kind of crumbling down. And now, like Gen Z, less and less of them are going to college even, so they can't even get them into the college debt thing. And so like this is where the whole thing's going to collapse, and that's why we're going to see a massive deflationary bubble pop here.
Yeah. I think going forward, I think that a lot less people are going to go to college. I think that college is very important for some aspects. Like there's some things you just can't do without a college degree, such as engineering or being a doctor.
I don't know, man. I
What do you
did
mean by
not
that?
need an engineering degree to do our job.
Oh, yeah. No, I don't think I really needed one either. I think I just needed the school of hard knocks. But for a lot of engineering, I think you do need an engineering degree. I think, for example, what I learned about Six Sigma and other industrial engineering aspects was something I needed a school to learn from. I mean, I could have learned it
Yeah.
by myself, but I wouldn't have.
I mean, there's aspects of it for sure. Like, don't get me wrong, but like 99% of my job did not require. Like, what it should have been is it should have been. I don't, we have so many college graduates, it's not really
I
funny. But
think
like,
we were pretty much engineering
ideally,
techs.
ideally, you would funnel all the really boring stuff I didn't want to do onto someone else that maybe didn't have a. And then I got to do all the cool stuff that actually required the engineering degree. But that's not how life works in general. Sometimes you got to eat the shit sandwich, so you might as well have the one with the olive on top.
Olives are good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah. No, I think you're probably about spot on there.
How's the job market? Because that's the other thing is like they just haven't required people to look for jobs right now, and those checks are gonna run out in July. So like, how's the job market looking out in like the Seattle area and where you've been looking? Because I know here in Minnesota, there's like fucking nothing, and I've looked in a little bit in North Dakota too, and there's just nothing.
It's okay for some jobs. For example, I've been applying to some of the bigger firearm manufacturers, and all of them seem to be hiring right now, which is no surprise because everyone and their mother has gone and bought a gun recently.
That is true.
Um, but the problem is that everyone is applying for jobs. Tons of people are out of jobs right now, and every application I'm applying to on LinkedIn, which is way more than just firearms, has at minimum about 60 applicants to the job. Maybe it's always been that way. I didn't remember that when I was applying to jobs right out of college. but it's pretty competitive right now. It's definitely a buyer's market.
Yeah, dude, are you saving your money for when kind of some of this stuff blows over, and then all the liberal people that like panic bought a gun are like, ooh, guns are gross, and like go and sell their gun right after this whole thing passes, and just fucking prices tank.
Maybe a little bit. I might buy something again. I could always use another gun.
Yeah,
But no, not really. I've got everything I need. I think, I've got a very reliable rifle. I've got a reliable concealed carry piece. I've got a reliable hunting shotgun. I've got a reliable hunting rifle, and I've got a reliable large pistol. So I don't think I really need too much more.
yeah. I think I basically just want a pistol is like the last thing that I potentially need.
Yeah,
Even
I
then, I
would
don't really
suggest
need it.
the problem with people in North Dakota, especially, in my opinion, North Dakota, South Dakota, Midwest, North area in general, is a lot of people over there seem to grow up with firearms and they think that they know everything about them because their daddy gave them a 10/22 when they were 8, and they've been, shooting for their entire lives.
I mean, that
Most
helps.
people, I mean, it does. Don't get me wrong. Being familiar with something is a good thing, but I think it also gives people a false sense of confidence. For example, I thought I really knew what I was doing with guns, and before I got my concealed carry, my parents really wanted me to take a pistol class, and I did it just, to make them happy. I did not need to spend that money, but I wanted to make them happy. That way, they wouldn't be on my case about it. And I learned more about pistols in a 3-day class, 2-day class, than I think I ever could have learned just from myself. And I am a much better pistol shooter because of it. And I would say that I almost think that everyone should go and take a class,
Yeah, I don't.
at least a basic class.
Yeah, I don't disagree. Actually, there's a really sweet tradition I learned about that like Europeans do, which is they have like gun clubs kind of thing. So basically, um, like that class that you talked about, like they'll do like competitions and stuff like that, and then like from like really young ages of like marksman competitions and such, and then like afterward, like it's a whole thing, right? And then like afterwards, there's like a ball and stuff, or like a barbecue, and everyone's having a good time, and yeah, and then like there's like a yeah like a ball or whatever, so like the guys can meet like the girls and they can go and take them and dance and stuff like that, and uh, seemed like a really kind of cool concept.
Yeah, no, I did a report back in the day on hunter's education, and I think that everyone in the United States should have to take hunter's education if they want to go hunting, because
You
it's not
do.
just about you. I don't think that all states do. Or is that correct?
You have to have a hunter's education certificate to get a hunting license.
Okay, well, I know that that's true in Washington, South Dakota, and North Dakota. I didn't know that that was true everywhere, though.
It's true, man. I would be highly surprised if it's not true in every state.
Okay, all right. Well, let's say that that's true, for the sake of argument. So, hunter's education has lowered accidental shootings in some cases by like 90% in some states. And I don't have the numbers right here in front of me. I did this report quite a while ago, and this is old information. This would be 4 years old information. But education, which I thought hunter's education was really lacking and very generic and very basic, but it's lowered the accidental shooting rates by such a degree that I would suggest that education across the board for concealed carry or for just having a gun in your home in general would make this country a much safer place.
Yeah. Do you
At the
know?
same
I
time,
mean, like
yeah,
the accidental discharge rates can't be that high.
I know people who've accidentally discharged their firearms, people who I would not have expected to,
I mean, I'm
who I
not
would
saying
have
it doesn't
considered.
happen.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, but yeah, I mean, mistakes happen, and you got to make sure that you're being safe and treating every weapon like it's a loaded weapon, and not pointing your barrel at someone, even if it's with a open. Yeah, just you got to be careful out there. It is a weapon. It's meant to kill things. So
Yes, it is. Yeah. I don't know, my opinion is more education is generally better. I have a hard time saying that the government should regulate that because I don't think the government does very much correctly. I would argue that the only good thing about government is that it gives a sense of stability to people and it makes it so an economy is possible, at least in today's current environment. Um, but my problem with suggesting something like there should be basic measures we take to make sure that if we are going to have an armed populace, that it should be a well trained armed populace. Is that I'm worried that if we gave the government that power, then we'd be trying to give them an inch and they'd take a mile.
yeah, but I don't like the government's us, man. Like the government doesn't do anything that we don't ask it to, right? It's
I don't think we asked them to go to war in Iraq.
yeah, we did.
No, I
Like
suppose we did, but it was a bunch of I don't know. That's a really weird one. We didn't
it
ask them to go to war in Libya. That's for certain.
that is true, but I mean, I don't know. People were super trusting and they're like, ah, I'm not gonna question what's going on, and like people don't take personal responsibility for what's going on, and so because of that, we end up in this situation where yeah, like the government's able to do what they want. Like the government is basically like the lowest moral acts as the lowest moral arbitrator of the people, right? So whatever your lowest moral standard is, that's what the government's going to act like. And so if your lowest moral standard is pretty high, then the government will act with high moral standard. If it's very low, like we have currently because of our degenerate culture, then it's going to act like a low moral standard. On top of the fact that, our country isn't actually run by Americans anymore, but that's a whole side thing.
Yeah, we can definitely get into that at a different time. I'd love to get into that, by the way.
Uh, so yeah, well, any thoughts on what I just said, or we can get into that, I guess, if you wanted to.
Well, I've got another point I'd like to get into. No, I hear what you're saying about the government. The government, so for example, American citizens make up the government. All of our presidents have to be American. I guess Schwarzenegger and I guess that's probably the only one I can think of off the top of my head who's a foreign-born man who operated in our government as the governor of California. But again, he was elected by Americans.
Yeah, but again, that yeah,
The problem with our country, I think, is that we are more of a democracy than a republic right now. And I think that both can be good. A republic is guaranteeing the rights
probably
of
more
their
of a
citizens.
democracy than a republic.
I think that we vote a lot to favor some people above others in the country now.
That has nothing to do with whether or not it's a democracy or a republic.
A democracy means that you have two wolves and a sheep deciding on what to have for dinner, and a republic is the sheep does. It doesn't matter if the two wolves vote to have the sheep for lunch. The sheep has certain inalienable rights.
I kind of get what you're saying. I don't necessarily agree with how you defined it, but I don't have a great way of explaining it in a different light. So that's okay.
Yeah, I think that's one of the founding fathers that said that. I don't know. I've always seen it to make sense.
The two wolves and the sheep thing, I get. Like, yeah, that's a great way to describe democracy. But the I don't know. The two wolves don't care if the sheep. Like, our republic works in a way where it's like this sheep has rights, and the wolves are like, we're wolves, we don't care.
Yeah, that's true.
So,
Yeah.
what was that other point you wanted to bring up?
I want to talk about Civil War, and what are your thoughts on that? Do you think we could actually get into a civil war? Do you think we could have another constitutional convention within the next 10 years here?
Constitutional convention, I'm giving a 0% chance of happening. Um, I shit's been wild, but yeah, there's no way a constitutional convention's happening.
You don't think that the balkanization of the United States is possible?
No, that's possible. Um,
Oh,
it's I don't like. Here's the thing: if you look at history, like shit's been wild before, man. Like look at 1920s. Look at um the times like before the civil. Like, look, people aren't shooting each other on the Senate floor right now, so like we haven't reached Civil War levels of crazy yet.
thank
So,
God.
I mean, it was a different time, so I don't think that would necessarily happen today. If even like we're, it's kind of trending that direction, and there is going to be like a split up, but it's I don't think it's going to happen how people are imagining it's going to happen.
Well, one thing I've realized, so, I was born, raised in Seattle area. I went to school in South Dakota, and I worked in North Dakota for two different companies. And one thing I realized between that is America really is a bunch of different tribes. The people of Seattle are very different from the people of South Dakota, and I would even argue that the people of North Dakota are, in many regards, significantly different than the people in South Dakota, and the people of Minnesota are different from the people of anywhere else that I just mentioned. And without something that really holds us together, without some sort of very strong glue, I don't see how it's possible to continue as the same country.
Yeah, I mean, like, okay, so part of the problem is that America's been ethnically cleansed to the point of like nobody outside of certain groups that are recent immigrants, no, like nobody knows who or what tribe they belong to. They don't have a nation anymore.
Yeah. Yep.
So like my situation, I'm like, what nation am I supposed to be a part of? Like, and white isn't a thing. Neither is black. Neither is like
No, definitely.
Asian isn't even a thing. Like, well, it is a thing, but like if you ask someone like a Chinese person gets angry if you think they're Japanese, or a Korean person, or if you think they're like Korean or something, like because they're not Korean, they're not Japanese, they're Chinese, and they're very proud of that fact because they understand what a nation is. And we're in a situation where the whole the water's been muddied to a degree that it's impossible to tell what's going to happen. And so, like, part of what the Civil War is going to sort out is it's going to form new nations, and people are going to have new nations to call themselves part of. And we'll see how that plays out. Like, I don't know exactly how it's going to split down. Um, like, my heritage is Irish and German, primarily Irish. I don't know how many more people are split like that. Is there like a coalition that's going to be like an Irish German faction that forms up somewhere in the Midwest or something like that? Maybe. I don't know. Um,
I think we're too far removed from that now. I don't think it means anything to be German or Irish or Scottish or English anymore.
I mean, if you're a CivNet, you'd believe that, but that's not how that works.
Yeah, no, I think the civic nationalism. I think for the current way, so I think it's possible to avoid a civil war. I think it's possible to have a strong country again. I think it's possible to have a country that is like very diverse. By that I just mean ethnically diverse.
All right,
But
you're gonna have to
one,
explain how you think this is all possible.
yeah, I actually am prepared to explain it. So I've heard it referred to as the lunchroom test before. So if you go into a high school and you look at a lunchroom, right, you're gonna have the different ethnic groups broken up into different lunch sections a lot of the time. At least this is the way it was at my high school and junior high, and I've heard most other people say
That was how it
similar
was at my
things.
school.
Yep. I think it's pretty self-evident. However, one thing that I'd also like to point out is there's also the football table or the wrestling table, and those people would be Mexicans, blacks, whites, Asians, whoever the hell is there, Indians. Uh, by that I mean Asian, not native.
Yeah, I got what you're talking about.
Yep, but yeah, my school, Seattle. Anyway, so one thing is that you had this football team or this wrestling team, and everyone's working towards the same general goal. The wrestling team, everyone's challenging each other to be the best individual that they can be, because you're only an individual when you're wrestling. It's only ever you. And with football, everyone's challenging each other to be the best team player that they can be. And everyone's working towards the same thing. It's trying to conquer the enemy of the other football team. And that's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, like, look, we would get along and stuff, but the matter of fact is, the like the white people and the black people and the Asian people and stuff like that had, well, there wasn't that many Asians in my school, but at least on the football team, um,
My
they all
school.
had like different cultures, right? And
Sure.
we were amicable to a point. Sometimes we'd hang out and stuff like that, but even within the team, like the friend group still, for the most part, broke down along racial lines and stuff like that. And we would I'd have friends that kind of crossed those lines here and there and stuff like that, but it wasn't that common. And generally, what would happen is if if you had like if you had a couple ethnic friends or whatever, where like let's say you had like a friend that was Mexican or a friend that was like black or something like that, like they'd hang out with your group or whatever, but they'd also have like another friend group that was like primarily black or Hispanic or something like that, and um, I can guarantee you the cultures between those two were different. I don't know how different, but they were at least different.
Sure.
So
Yeah,
like
no,
even
I
with
hear
the
what you're
whole
saying.
football thing, like you have those innate kind of cultural aspects, different aspects that are going to be a part of your what you see and stuff like that.
Yeah, but so one thing I want to point out. So on the football team, I mean, I guess I was on the line, and I guess our line was consisted of a guy who was a quarter Japanese, a guy who was black, Mexican, me, white guy, and a couple other white guys. But anyway, no one really cared about the skin color or background. They cared, can you do the job? Can you fill your hole? Can you attack when you need to attack? Can you defend when you need to defend? And everyone is just relying on you to be part of the unit called the football team or the line. And I think that this would be possible in a broad sense for across the nation. So again, I'm an anarchist. But I think that if we're going to stick with the government, which honestly seems like the right thing to do for the moment, for probably the next couple of generations at least, probably the next many generations actually, I think that, this is probably a pretty un American idea. I think that having mandatory military service where everyone is going through the same very tough conditions and everyone has to do their job like a football team, I think that that could make us a stronger culture despite our differences, or at
Yeah, but
least
we
make
don't
it
have
from.
the morale to do that. No one would put up with that. Because the thing is, you'd have to force people to do that. Well, people don't want to do that. That's why like, one of the reasons they got rid of the draft is because they couldn't enforce the draft nowadays. Imagine if they tried to enforce a draft so we could go kill Iran. No one would put up with it. And then you would just start the Civil War immediately.
Yeah, no, I hear that. That's definitely true. I was more thinking of I think it's Israel, right? I think they have a 2 year or 1 year minimum service line, right?
Yeah, sure, but like even their service is like their morale's going down the tank, and part of the reason that uh they could do that and stuff like that is because there's like a lot of national pride in that nation for like, oh, we finally got like the homeland back kind of thing, and we're surrounded by enemies kind of thing. We gotta band together and hold off these invaders type thing. uh and there's a lot of other aspects going on in Israel right now as well. But that's what makes it work. But they're getting demoralized because they're constantly like, when you are effectively like a bully, um, and you take a very advanced military with all the fancy doodads and stuff like that, like the United States Army has and like the Israel Army has, and then you just go and basically kill armed civilians and insurrectionists that are basically the backbone of all the fighting forces in like the militia type fighting forces that are over in the Middle East. It starts to wear on the morale of um, units that fight them, and then it degrades their overall fighting potential as well. It's something that's described in Bill Lynn's or William Lynn's Fourth Generation Warfare Handbook. How the more you fight these lower tier armies um, and just kind of beat up on them, it doesn't improve you at all. It just kind of it makes you worse in a certain sense. I can't remember exactly how I described it, but yeah.
Well, yeah, if you're fighting a bunch of guerrillas and people who are willing to blow up their children to get you, I can see how that would put a damper on your enthusiasm for warfare. And I think war is bad. I think that we should engage in it as seldomly as possible. And I think virtually every war we've gotten into, we could have avoided through other means.
War is part of the human condition.
It
It's
does seem to be that way, doesn't it?
it's unfortunate, but it's just kind of a reality of the world.
Yeah, but most war isn't necessary. For example, World War One, where I think that most everyone would agree was just a complete catastrophe for the West. It destroyed all of the wealth that had been created in the Western countries, and it destroyed um, it destroyed. Sorry, my dog. Let me just close that window real quick.
All right.
And there goes my fan. Okay. I don't think war is as necessary as we believe it is, and I don't think that war is virtually ever the right thing to do unless you have an invading country. And
Not as
nowadays,
necessary as you think it is. Like we're in one of the most peaceful times of all time. It's about to get a lot more violent in the next decade, or not decade, century.
sure, but it doesn't mean it's necessary. It doesn't mean it's the right thing to do. Just because it's the thing that we've been doing forever does not mean it's the right thing to do.
But that assumes that man isn't fallen and that he isn't gonna like. War is just part of the human condition, like I said. Like it's baked into the kick. Do I want to have war? Do I want to go fight in a war? Not particularly. No. Getting shot at doesn't sound like the most fun thing.
No.
Getting shot sounds pretty awful and all the awfulness that comes along with it. But it's and the thing is, like, who knows what the next wars are gonna look like? Like, are they gonna be like the meat grinders of World War One? I don't know. It's hard to tell. I mean, the next war is probably gonna be. What was I'm trying to remember the way it's worked out. Basically, because of the amount of immigration that we've had and the various tribal lines that are going to get drawn in the next conflict that's going to take place in America, it's gonna be pretty bloody. It it's gonna it's gonna be bloodier than anything Americans have experienced before. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, my big concern with America right now. So going back to more the Civil War aspect, is that most Americans are consumers and they're not producers. For example, some of us are producers, but we're still not producing the right things for us to live. For example, when we were engineers at our old company, we produced equipment that was necessary for oil fields and for construction and landscaping and all that, which is necessary in our society.
Yeah.
But we're not
Unless you
producing.
build things, you aren't actually wealthy. You're just borrowing on a credit card, which is what America's been doing for at least 30 years.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. That's true. But so many Americans were so far removed from agriculture that I'm worried that if things do collapse and the dollar isn't worth anything, then oh, dog, I gotta kill that dog. But anyway, side point. In Russia, when all of a sudden their currency was worth nothing and the farmers didn't want to sell their grain, you had just mass starvation across Russia. I think it was somewhere around 20 million in their first 4 year plan or 5 year plan.
What? When when is this? What time period are you talking about?
1920
Oh, okay.
starting. This is when
Yeah,
their
but that's
currency.
not like you got to think it's not that kind of Russia that we're going to be looking at. It's going to be like the collapse of the Soviet Union style Russia, right? It's like and that was pretty bloodless and things went pretty smooth. I don't think it's going to be that smooth in America, but uh, one of the things that helped that transition is the fact that a lot of people had food because they were growing gardens. That it was just part of the culture, mainly because communism wasn't great at feeding them. So, but that played into their advantage because unlike Americans who are kind of lazy and just kind of expect food to be there in the grocery store, and I'm guilty of this as anyone else. Even with the small garden I have, it's definitely not enough to feed me, um, much less the rest of my family. Uh, so it's just, I don't know, it's a different kind of thing.
I want to point out necessity is the mother of all invention. I don't think anyone can disagree with that.
Yeah, but look at
And
Shaz, dude. Like, you can't just when the shit hits the fan, you're gonna need food now, and you need to start planting 3 6 months ago, and that assumes that it happens during the summer, like nice months when you can actually get a garden going.
yeah, I'm actually pretty good at fasting now. I generally fast a couple times a week. I don't think I can fast for 3 months. I don't think I would bet on me in that situation.
I don't know if I could make it 3 months, but I could make it a while. I still got a
If you can
good
make,
layer on me.
yeah, yeah. But anyways, I think that people, for the most part, would figure it out. However, I think that there would be a lot of teething problems with that. Literally, I think, like the Joker said, all of these civilized people will eat each other when they don't get the food that they need.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the group, right? The thing is, the people that are going to eat each other, I probably wouldn't consider civilized to begin with. The people I consider civilized are the people that live in the country, and the people that live in the country are fine because they already grow their own food, they already have communities, they already have families, they have everything they need and are anti-fragile. It's the people in the cities that are in trouble, and those are the people that are uncivilized anyway. They're, you know, just expect everything kind of to be there when they expect it, and how dare they make me wait 5 minutes for food and stuff like that. And I'm not saying I'm above it. Like, I'm a fat, lazy city person to a certain degree. I'm trying to change that, but
Yep,
it's
me too.
it takes time and it takes effort. And so like those people are going to try to eat each other, sure, but it, it won't matter because their their entire thing's going to collapse. Like civilization is the art of being able to put lots of people in a very confined space and not have them die like flies.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good summary of what civilization is. I don't know. I think that the best thing that's going to come out of all this unrest, and let's say things do collapse, let's say the dollar's worth toilet paper tomorrow. Um,
It's going to go the
which,
other way.
what do you mean by that? Oh,
We're going to
toilet
have
paper's
no, we're going to have deflation, so the dollar's going to be worth a lot more.
actually, give me your argument on that. I'm interested to hear what you have to say about that.
Well, it's like what I talked about at the beginning of the podcast. There's the debt's going to get called in, right? And everyone's
Hmm.
going to default on their debts. And then when you default on debt, it removes money from the system. So any money that is in the system inherently becomes more valuable. So as long as you don't have debts and you have cash, you're in a pretty good position. Now, you might want to get some hedges in there, maybe some gold, maybe gold's probably your safest bet at this current juncture, gold and silver. Um, but those are like hedges. That's if that makes it so like if there's deflation or inflation, if I'm wrong, which I don't think I will be, uh, then you still have the relative purchasing power of whatever you had gotten it with. So
Yeah, yeah, I hear what you're saying. Yeah, that makes sense.
yeah, if you want to buy a house, I'd wait 6 months. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's fair. I'm definitely not looking at buying a house yet. I have enough money to pay off my car, but man, do I not have a lot of money after that.
I would pay your car off now.
You think so?
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Okay, you're sure.
I mean, I don't know what kind of financial situation it puts you in, but if you have like a couple grand left over after that, and you have like the taxes, like enough money set aside for like the taxes that apparently come out of the unemployment stuff, uh, I would pay it off. Unless there's a 0%, unless you have 0% interest on it right now, then I would just set that money aside and have it ready to pay off if the interest rate ever kicks in, and in case there's a better opportunity that comes up in the meantime. Otherwise, I would just pay it off. If there's interest accruing on it, like, yeah,
There is. Yeah, no, that's interesting. I'll have to look into that. And I would have like $2,000 left over at almost exactly if I was to pay it off right now.
I hate being in debt, so that's personally what I would do. But
Yeah, no, I hate debt too. I think most reasonable people do.
yeah, told you
Yeah,
not to get that car, man.
yeah. Actually, that stupid car I had before, that old Toyota. Um, I took it to a auto mechanic and I said, "Hey, my car's not working right. I think it's the spark plugs. Can you guys replace the spark plugs for me?" You had to take apart the whole engine to get to the spark plugs. Fantastic design, Toyota.
Yeah,
But yeah, they actually never replaced my spark plugs, so that was super exciting. So they
wait, they
just kind
just
of
took the entire thing apart, didn't replace them, and put it back together.
no. There's two spark plugs that you can get to really easily. The spark plugs that I had been able to get to, and they'd replaced those two, but they just neglected to take apart the rest of the engine to get to the other two spark plugs.
Hmm.
Or other four spark plugs, I think. So yeah, no, that was not exciting. So I actually replaced my vehicle because someone had been dishonest with me and did not do the work that they said they were going to do, even though I paid them like $800 to do it. So that was exciting.
Rough, rough
It
one, man.
was not a party.
Yeah, iCar's kind of getting on its last legs right now. It's
No kidding.
got like some grinding noise on it, so might need to get replaced here.
Yeah, yeah. No, I don't know. I would suggest something Toyota or Mazda, something reliable. Get a Honda Civic.
I'm not spending money. I gotta
Yeah.
save.
Hey man, maybe you could trade that old car in for like, $500, have a down payment for a used Honda Civic.
Nah.
Joking a little bit. Yeah.
Anyway,
Anyhow, yeah, no, I think going back to one of our earlier points, with all the craziness that's going on right now, I don't know about you, but I've had a lot of people contact me and say, "Hey, Nate, I think you know a thing or two about guns," and I said, "Yeah, I know a thing or two, but not much more than that." And everyone's been asking me what to buy. By the way, if anyone's listening to me and wants to take my advice on this, if you want a pistol, get a Glock 19. If you want a shotgun, get a Mossberg 500 or Remington 870. If you want a rifle, get an AR-15. But a
pretty
lot of
good,
people,
well-rounded setup.
yeah, those are super basic. Million YouTube tutorials on every single one of them. Very easy to figure out. Very easy to maintain. I only suggest basic things for people who do not have a wide knowledge base, and also get yourself training. But anyway,
Yeah,
side
I
point.
think the ranges are open again, so you can go try them all out before you make your purchase.
Yeah, not in Seattle. They're not.
Mm.
But
I haven't
anyway,
checked here either, but
yeah, I mean, I've been just going shooting at I don't know, I guess shooting pits, local free to shoot places. But anyway, side point. One thing I really like about that is a lot of these people who've been calling me have been traditionally more lefty, very much wanting firearm control, government firearm control for the populace. But they see that the government is not enforcing laws. For example, there's a COVID shutdown right now, and you have tons of rioters and protesters, which are separate, who are not following the laws. You have people tearing down statues. You have all this kind of madness going on in America right now, and people really want to be able to take their self defense seriously. And I think the good thing about that is people are going to be more self reliant on themselves. And I think that more people like me and you, who have gotten into gardening, I think more people are going to be more self reliant on their own food source. And I think the nice thing about, for example, the Soviet Union is I think a lot of the people there did not particularly trust their government. And like you said, they had their own gardens. That was a cultural a culturally wise thing to do for them. And I think that with these mad times, I think more people will take more self reliance towards their own food stocks, towards their own self defense, and probably other things. Probably like learning how to sew, not buying a new shirt every time you get a rip. No, anyways, I
Dude, who
think that
buys new clothes?
I mean I do, but not too often. I generally just
Same.
repair the clothes I have.
Like I wear clothes to the point where like like my parents and stuff are like, "How are you still wearing that? Like you can't go out in public in that." And then they like get me a new shirt. Like I
You
don't
make
replace
dad
shit.
stockings. Yeah, but
So,
what do you think about that? Do you think that Americans as a whole are going to be more self-reliant going forward, or do you think
mm,
that they're going to have to wait until they absolutely get hit in the face with a catastrophe, like a complete financial recession, before that most before most Americans take their own well-being seriously?
I think it's going to take a catastrophe. Like there's definitely going to be a portion of the population like the process of people waking up is a slow process, right? And so you'll have a certain percentage of the population as this like as you're kind of seeing it right now as this stuff's been kind of going on, especially with so like a good example is like the COVID versus the um like 9/11, right? So like 9/11 happened and they were able to put like the Patriot Act and a lot of draconian measures in place and people were like super excited for it and because it was trade safety for freedom and then get neither um and there was some people who were like I don't like this 9/11 thing, something seems off, something seems fishy, but like it was until years later that some of the various things kind of came to light. People started asking like why did building 7 collapse or whatever, and whatever your thoughts are on 9/11 like doesn't really matter, set that to the side. But now with this like corona thing, you're seeing like a kind of instantaneous reaction. People were like, "You're not allowed to do X, Y, and Z," and people were like, "Fuck you, I'm not." It's and so like, but it wasn't. It obviously wasn't a majority of the population. Plenty of people just went with the whole thing of like, they said shut down, so this is what we do, kind of thing. And so, it's a process. People are kind of, but like you had more people kind of come to that realization, and then when the riots happened, and all of a sudden they were like, well, riots are necessary and not a health risk, despite the fact that we said when you were protesting last week it was a health risk. So, obviously, like the whole conservatives pointing out hypocrisy doesn't help anyone. But there is a certain percentage of the population that, like, once they kind of see that hypocrisy, will it does make them kind of realize, oh, hey, there's something more going on here, and then they start looking into it and stuff like that. And so, but still, the majority of the population is going to be blind to the fact of what's going on until it's too late. Like Yuri Bezmenov has like a great thing where uh, he says uh, the people that are pushing for their own destruction are so bought into it and so lost on what's going on that and are so like moths to a flame kind of thing that they won't realize what the destruction that they've brought on themselves until the jackboot is on their neck and they're strangled to death. And like the new regime, like those like moths that they just kind of go along with everything, they're like eliminated when the new regime comes in because they're not useful. They're like kind of the useful idiots to get the new regime in and then they're removed. Um, you're like if you are a useful idiot right now, you're not condemned or doomed to it, right? You can change your perspectives and stuff like that, but you do like there's plenty of people that are in that situation. And some of it is not completely like it's on you to like correct it and all that stuff, but there's and I think part of the advantage of Corona is it's giving a lot of people extra time. And so some people haven't been using the time very wisely. They've been, binging Netflix and doing everything to just kind of, but like, it's like, what is it? You can only eat so much ice cream before you get a tummy ache, right?
Of course, yeah.
You can only watch all the garbage that they're pumping out on Netflix and Hulu and Disney Plus and stuff like that until you're just kind of tired of it and you need something more substantial to kind of sustain yourself. And so you're going to have a lot more people looking into that stuff. And now that you've just given people, I don't know, 3 months to just dig into something, to work on a project they haven't had time to kind of like, uh, they aren't just like worn out from working all day, every day, and just, uh, and wondering when what's going to happen with their next paycheck. Like it's not for everybody, but it has given a larger chunk of the population time to look into things that they wouldn't have probably otherwise had the opportunity to. And so that might help in the a greater percentage of the population being ready for any coming potential catastrophe.
I mean, I hear what you're saying. I think it's definitely going to contribute to the creativity of our population as a whole. If you have more time where you're not forced to go do things, well, I mean, you're not forced to go work ever. But I would assume idle time would help with creativity. I don't know if it would help people prepare because you need to use that time appropriately, and you'd have to feel the need to prepare. For example, I'm not going to go buy. I don't know if I think that there's going to be no food tomorrow. I'm going to go online and spend a huge percentage of my money on food that won't go bad.
Like peanut
Um,
butter.
yeah, like peanut butter. Peanut butter is awesome. Everyone, I suggest Jiffy's, my favorite. Not a sponsor of this podcast, but
Yet.
anyway, not yet. Jiffy's, we're looking. Anyway, side point, main point. Yeah, I'm not going to go spend a huge money on my food if I think I'm going to be able to get food tomorrow at the grocery store. If I just walk in, I hand them the paper that we call money, and I can get food. There's no point in stocking up. Zero point of it. But I don't think that most people are there yet, where they think that they need to go do that. I think the anxiety level is actually relatively low in that aspect. At the same time, I think that there is I don't know if it's significant because I'm actually you and me are probably the only ones that I know who have even thought about gardening or being more self-sustainable with food, and I
Oh, there's
am
plenty
a
of people.
long way off there.
There's plenty of people that are in that camp. I mean, like all the bears, right? Like that's their kind of thing. It's
All the
trying to
who?
build families and gardens and homesteads. So, and that's what got me into it. So,
Yeah, no, the homesteading thing is actually really darn cool. I have actually been more interested in that recently. Hugely due to you, by the way.
you're welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Um, yeah, but you're also talking about, so you're taking examples from your own life and you're seeing it immediately from your perspective. And I can tell you in places like Seattle or the general area surrounding Seattle, greater Seattle area, most people are not taking their food supply super seriously. I mean, everyone's got a couple extra cans of spam around, but that only lasts so long.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. Here's the thing: we are pretty good at producing food, so I don't know if there is gonna be food shortages per se, right? But one good example is the the nutrient balance might be all off. I was watching one of Owen's streams yesterday, and he kind of pointed this out where, yeah, we might be able to harvest food, but like it's had to be genetically modified to such a degree that it doesn't really have any nutritional value in it. Like think of iceberg lettuce, like nice crisp taste, right? If you're going for a texture thing on a burger, great, but like there is
It's
no nutritional
totally,
value there.
it gives you like 3 calories for a meal. It's completely worthless.
Yeah. So,
It's
but like,
roughage.
just like think of like all the junk food and stuff like that. Like, there might be plenty of that stuff, but like, you're gonna have people that are just in this like awful state of just, like the they'll be fat, but like they're gonna be so nutritionally deficient that they're gonna feel hunger. They're just gonna feel crappy and stuff like that, and you know, I, and it's
Yeah,
it's on
lower
you,
your
right?
growth
Like you
ability.
chose
Yeah.
not to grow your food. You chose that to go constantly to the supermarket and whatever they offer, and so that's what we got.
Yeah, and even if you did stock, like let's pretend I do not, by the way. Let's pretend I've got just 100 jars of Jiffy peanut butter in my garage right now. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but
You're
Jesus
saying that
said,
like you don't have that.
shh,
I know
shh,
you.
shh. Anyway, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but Jesus said, man cannot live on peanut butter alone.
That is true. That is straight from the Bible.
Straight from the Bible. But I don't know. Even the people who do stock up on food or even do have their own gardens, the chance of them getting the correct amount of the correct nutritional balance, the correct nutritional diversity is probably fairly low. And I guess red meat, beans, and rice are the only things where so beans and rice you can get everything you need, and red meat you can get everything you need. But I'm kind of doubting that you really get everything you need from those. I guess I don't know enough about nutrition. I just kind of eat whatever is in my canned food or my peanut butter. But yeah, I think you are right that if we did have a time where we had a hard time feeding everyone, that people would not get the type of nutrition they need. And if you don't get the type of nutrition you need, I think that does have some cognitive decline. Um, if you're especially if you're eating garbage food, and that'd be bad for everyone.
Hmm. I mean, like we're all kind of in the B system to a certain degree. Take, like you and me have, um, what you call it, uh, gardens going, right? But
Yes,
we're using city water. Like, I don't have
correct.
a hand pump like well going to make it so that I'm not reliant on the or not reliant on that kind of government facility. And the truth of the matter is, when it comes down to truly creating a civilization, you are going to be reliant on these systems. Now, the difference between kind of like our current society and a historic, I don't know if historic is the correct term, but basically a different way that you can do it to have these institutions and systems that you can at least trust and know aren't going to get flipped off on you, or aren't so big that you can't keep track and know whether or not the behind the scenes is so corrupt or ill managed or yada yada yada, uh, that it ends up falling apart on you. Just think like Roman aqueducts, right?
Mhm.
Um, is to have like a small community, right? And making sure that you have a strong local community. One of the who is it? Pier San Giorgio, is that his name? I think he talked about like some of the key things to have to make sure that you're ready for the apocalypse. Basically, if anything happens, if you have these 7 things, you should be good to go. And I thought it was a pretty good list. Um, so the 7 things are food and water,
Mhm.
and health. So any medical supplies that you might need, Advil, just basic little things. Um, and I, on top of that, probably some kind of knowledge about um, how to cure things, where to maybe procure things like Advil or other pain type relievers. Because like when the stores get shut down and all the supplies, like if it goes really really south, like Rome or Bronze Age collapse type south, like where are you going to get those health supplies? Like nobody's manufacturing that stuff anymore. Manufacturing collapsed, right? And I don't think we're going to go through that level of collapse, but I don't know. I'm not saying there's not a 0% chance of that happening. But not to make people afraid. Uh, just take small steps to potentially try to get one of these 7 things set up, and slowly start building your way towards there. So anyway, like I said, there's food, there's water, there's health, there's defense, which isn't as important as people think it is. Uh,
No, not usually.
there's community. Um, I think faith is in there. I don't remember if faith was tied into community. Um, do do do.
And by
There's
that you
two
just
more that I
mean
always
religious.
forget. What?
By that you mean religious faith, or do you mean faith in the institutions, or do
No,
you
like
mean just
religious faith.
having some sort of philosophy?
But I think that might be tied in with community. I don't remember if that's. That was a separate. What else was there? Oh, knowledge was one for sure. So like making sure like there's this really cool little book called um, something's pocket guide, and it's basically Google before Google, right? And that's got a reference to uh, oh, it's what is it? Something pocket reference. Let's see if I can find it real quick. Uh,
Do it.
I think it's called Pocket Reference Guide. Yeah, this thing. So this it's a tiny little book. Actually, Ed had this on his desk. This thing. So it's $10, right? There is like anything
Wait,
and everything
sorry,
you
can you
could
say the name of
possibly
it?
think of in this book. It's tiny. It makes it so you can travel really easily with it. And so if there's something that you potentially need to look up and you're in a situation where you need to travel or whatever, you can have this available to you. So if the internet's not around or something like that, just having little things like this are really useful for surviving. Another thing that might be useful for people is David the Good's Grow or Die.
I would say like things like the Nurse's Handbook would also be good. They used in Pulp Fiction to find out how to pump an adrenaline needle into someone. You do not have to stab someone 3 times, by the way.
Yeah. So things of that nature. Just having any don't feel overwhelmed. Like if people want to get into this kind of thing, like don't feel overwhelmed. Don't feel like you have to do everything tomorrow. You know, the chance that the apocalypse happens tomorrow is probably zero. And let's be real, like you're growing a tree here. Yeah, the classic phrase is when's the best time to plant a tree? It's 20 years ago. When's the second best time to plant a tree? Today.
Now, yep.
So just you're planting a tree that you're going to be building. Just take small steps, make sure they're realistic, and just kind of keep working on that step by step. And realize there's going to be setbacks. There's going to be days that you're like, I don't feel like doing something, and you kind of fall off the horse or whatever. Just realize that, you know, don't like feel guilty and spiral and stuff like that. Just realize, okay, I made a mistake. This is what I was doing previously. This is how I worked up to there, and just take those small steps to get back there.
Yeah, yeah. Even a bad plan is better than no plan. You need to be able to plan it. Like, let's say you do have a horrible plan for, I don't know, surviving the apocalypse or just putting yourself together in being a better, more efficient member of society. If you have no plan, you're gonna have nothing. If you have a bad plan, well, then you can come back and reorganize it, and maybe even bounce ideas off of other people, rubber duck people, if you will.
Yeah,
And
and that is especially true when you're working with a group, right? Uh,
which a community is always a group, but yeah,
yeah.
and communities
What I'm saying
very.
is like a bad plan that everyone follows is better than three kind of good plans that people half follow each of them.
I don't know if that's totally true. I mean, we could have a whole plan where we sacrifice a newborn infant to the sun god every day to make sure that the
Yeah,
sun comes up.
very true. That
But
that's more. I guess that maybe doesn't necessarily apply what we're talking about right now, but that's more in instances where it's like a very fast-paced, like you have to kind of just follow the plan kind of decision. A good example is like room clearing, right? Not like that's going to be a situation you're probably going to run into, but in
yeah, got it.
situations where you have to make a decision in pretty short order, it's better to have a bad plan that everyone follows than not either not having a plan or having three different plans or two different plans that half the crew follows one, half the crew follows the other, and then the entire thing falls apart. So it's another little tidbit to keep in mind.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree. And also, I'd want to point out that I think shelter is the most important thing, first and foremost. Because if you have shelter, then you protect yourself from the environment, and then you can go. Everything else stems from shelter. After shelter, you can help other people get shelter. You can have a community. You can get yourself clean food, clean water, and then you have a way of defending yourself. All that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I do think that
Oh, shelter was on the list. I don't think I listed that one.
I think that is number one, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah, you're gonna need a place to stay. Uh, yeah, I had that list written down somewhere. I think it's back in my apartment in North Dakota. Um,
Yeah, 'cause if you have shelter, that's good, because then where are you going to store your food? Where are you going to store your equipment? What are you going to defend? Are you going to be able to protect yourself from the environment?
Yeah.
I don't know.
And
Shelter is absolutely the most important.
another good way to think about defense is like not having stuff people can steal, right? Like if you're sitting on a hoard of gold, yeah, it's pretty easy for someone to come in there and just kind of loot your area. If you're like a farmer and you like, what are they going to steal? They can't take, like, are they going to take your half like grown crops out of the field? No. Like, are they going to sit around and like have to tend to the garden and stuff like that? Like, taking you out is more of a burden on like whatever warlord takes over if you're in that situation, then the it's a higher cost to them to take you out than it is to just leave you alone, kind of thing. So that's a way that you can kind of, especially if you're kind of anti-gun right now, I'm sure you'll change over time. That's a different way that you can kind of think of how to defend yourself without necessarily needing to use force, right? Setting yourself up in a situation where you're either a benefit or at least like there's nothing to take from you.
Yeah. Yeah, and also I want to point out there's a lot of videos. So I subscribe to Active Self Protection on YouTube. A martial artist who reviews a lot of different videos. John Correa is his name, on people using self defense to protect their homes, or just to protect their person at various locations. And if you have a way of defending yourself, most of the time, most people don't want to mess with you, because you can have really nice things. I could have a bunch of Lamborghinis in my 10 car garage. But if I have some way of defending myself, most people don't want to take that sort of risk, because no one wants to get shot or get killed.
Yeah.
Um, and
Yeah, killing someone's a high risk probability. Like if especially if they're defending, it's like do I want to fight this person and potentially
Sorry, Andrew, you cut out there. Do you want to try again?
oh, my bad. I hit control.
All right, testing.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. I did not hear what you said.
Okay. Sorry. I forgot I had control set up to be mute and then I just like control or alt tabbed or something like that and hit control. Didn't even think about it.
How dare you?
My bad. Okay. Well, I don't even remember what I was talking about.
Killing someone is a high risk probability.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, killing someone's a high risk probability. You probably don't want to be doing that. Especially if you can set it up to where like you can kind of have a mutual agreement, right? Because there's no you can have a huge hoard of wealth or whatever, but if you're dead, like what are you even supposed to do with that, right? You can't take it with you, as the phrase goes.
Yeah, and also I want to point out someone who is willing to go commit violence, even very basic violence, like if you want to, I don't know, beat people up, or if you're a horrible person and you beat your wife or your children or whatnot, you're not going to be welcomed in society. Most people are not at all okay with violence of pretty much any sort in today's community, and people understand self defense for the most part. I think the majority of people, I believe the majority of people, can understand that they could be in a situation where they have to defend themselves or their property or their loved ones. But anyone who is willing to go commit violence for the sake of especially material gain um, is going to be a social outcast if it's known that they have done that, or they'll be put in jail. Even without jail, they're still going to be virtually societally annihilated, destroyed.
Yeah, very true. Hmm. All right.
Yeah. All right. Do you want to do some conclusions here
Yeah.
to
Well, I
wrap?
don't know what to. We went all over the place, so uh, yeah. I
Well,
what?
this is our pilot, right?
Yeah. So I don't know. Next week, hopefully. Um. Well, okay. So next week is July 4th
Yep.
on Saturday. So are we gonna do this on Saturday again then, or no?
I think we should either let's not do it on Sunday. I'll be hungover. Let's do it on Friday or maybe Thursday.
All right, we'll coordinate something and figure it out. But and we'll make sure to get the it out to you next week sometime. But yeah, that was the first one. I think it was fun, and we'll see where these topics go. Um,
Hey, I want to do a couple conclusions here, if you don't mind.
yeah, go ahead.
All right. So anyway, in conclusion, with a couple things, because we definitely can't cover everything that we talked about, because we went way over all over the board, like Andrew just said. I think that part of this chaos in our society right now, in the American society as a whole, could result in some good things. I think that people might take their lives into their own hands a bit more than they have in the past. I think that people might take, for example, getting their food more into their own hands. Potentially, will be more financially responsible, and I think that people will take their own personal self defense more seriously, especially considering that the government as a whole is not doing the world's best job at I don't know, stopping violent looting or anything like that. And yeah, this was fun, and I look forward to doing this again.
Yeah, we will see you guys next time, and look forward to the next one.
All right, have a good one.
All right, bye.